Hello and welcome to Woman Who Chat. And today I'm chatting with Shelley Wilson, who is an international best-selling author, writer, mentor, and so much more. And before we get chatting about how to write your book, why you should write your book, etc., I'm going to just ask Shelley to introduce herself and give us a bit of background. How on earth did you get into writing, Shelley?
Oh, blimey. Okay, so you have to wind all the way back to me being an 8-year-old. I just loved reading. I absolutely adored it. And I think we all did back then, didn't we? We didn't have social media and all of that. So reading was my happy place. And I guess even back then I knew I want to write. Absolutely. That's all I wanted to do. I had a little typewriter. Do you remember those with the ribbons and all of that? I had carbon copy paper to do my manuscripts. And I guess I played at it because I didn't know anything way back then. But I was in my 40s before I kind of thought, right, I'm going to take myself seriously. And I started submitting short stories, letters. I won a few star letters. I've got a few bits and pieces, won a few prizes just from my letters. But it was when I was working as a holistic therapist that a lot of my clients were like, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. And I wanted to show them that they could, if they put their mind to it. But I was kind of like, oh, hang on a minute. You're telling them that they can conquer the world, but you're not writing. You're not doing what you want and you've said you're going to do. And that's when I started blogging. And so I set this challenge. I'm going to blog every single week for 52 weeks, a different challenge a week. And it was a journalist friend who said at the end, you do know you've written a book, Shelley. And I was like, no, that's the goal. But he says, you work in mind, body, spirit. You have literally 12 chapters, 12 months. And thanks to him, it was kind of like that light bulb. It's like, oh my goodness, I've written a book. So I changed the blog into a book. And that was what became my best-selling book, my first non-fiction. 2014, I think that one came out, and yeah, as they say, the floodgates have opened.
I loved reading that book because it was just literally your muses, your ramblings, the challenges you set yourself each month. And it was just really, you could really relate to it. And I've reread it as well, and it's a really great light read, and entertaining as well. Your personality really comes out in that book. So what led you on to then decide to go into werewolves? Because you've published, you write adult fiction, sorry, young adult fiction.
Yes, yeah.
And it's all the ghouls and ghosties and whatever, which totally isn't my thing, I'd just like to add. Because
no, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I get a few funny looks, I must say, when I'm at networking events. I think I love all of that stuff. I have always loved the fantasy, supernatural, horror side of stuff. Stephen King, James Herbert, absolutely was devouring all of their books when I was like 13. And I think what happened was I kind of, a lot of people relate to this. You get married, you have your children, and reading is the last thing you can do because you've got so much more to do. And when I got divorced, my kids were 2, 3, and 5. And all of a sudden, that was it. They were my entire world. And so reading just didn't come into it until they were in bed. And suddenly I was sat there on my own going, oh, I've got this time and space. And wandered into Waterstones. What on earth am I going to have? I can't remember who I like. I can't remember what genre I enjoy. And I stumbled into the young adults section. And of course, I love the covers. I love the artwork. I love all that kind of stuff. And I picked up, it was a book called Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. She's a werewolf book. And I was absolutely hooked. Just the writing, the coming of age. It took me back to being a 16-year-old, awkward, clumsy kid, finding my way through life again. And at that time, I was stumbling through life again. So it kind of felt right. And there's nothing taboo with young adult because young adults want to know what's going on. There's nothing you can hold back on. You can just talk about anything. And I love that. And of course, I've got 3 young adults myself. So it helps to have a captive audience.
And do they read your books?
My daughter makes me laugh because they've kind of inputted a few bits and pieces and characters and twists and that. But my daughter always says to me, oh, Mum, I'll wait until it comes out on Netflix.
I love it. So you've published now 19 books. That's an amazing achievement. But you're signed on a contract to a publisher. You've got a professional contract. But what I want to talk about today, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. So there's people going to be listening to this saying, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. And they say there's a book in everybody. So, you know, how do they step from I'd want to do that to actually getting it done and getting it out of their head onto, I was going to say paper, but it's now.
Yeah. Do you know, I still use those words when I'm doing my marketing. To be fair, I am a paper girl. That question is the one that is probably what launched my writing mentor business, because I got asked it so many times at networking events. I'd kind of rock up and say, yeah, I'm an author, I've done this. And everyone, how? I've got this idea, how do I get that out? And I mean, I was winging it for many years before I really got and understood how to do plotting, how to do outlining, character development, just understanding the groundwork, if you like, before you sit down and write. And it was that, once I clicked that was what got me to just those floodgates, you know, and just kept being able to write. Because without that groundwork, without knowing who you're writing for, why you're writing it, if it's a book or a blog post, because sometimes, you know, it could be just a blog series rather than having to go through the process of writing and publishing a book. I think once you understand all those sort of underlying bits, then it's a lot easier to write. I know now what I'm going to do. It's very similar. Like, I know you talk about it a lot with the woman who, you know, who's your business for? Who's your target audience? It's exactly the same when you're writing a book, exactly the same.
Yeah. And I think, you know, and it's coming up with the right idea, isn't it? Because it's okay writing for yourself, but if there's no audience there to read it,
absolutely,
it's just a passion project, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine, because sometimes it's just the self-satisfaction of holding your own book in your hand. But if you want to help your business raise, you know, that visibility, if you do want to make a bit of money, because it is possible, then yeah, you kind of have to have that audience waiting for your book at the end.
Yeah. And I think writing a book is a great business card. It's a great thing to, when you see somebody speak on stage, and I obviously, you know, I do a lot about women speaking on stage, but through the years, through the decades, even when I've seen a speaker, if that speaker has got a book, it just raises their credibility, you know, and that you almost know, well, they must really know their stuff. They've written a book.
Yeah, and that's been how it's been for so long, especially like with sort of the big 5 publishers. That was what the big authors were doing. You know, they were getting book signings, and they were doing these talks and TEDx talks where they've got the back of the room. They're in conferences and they're selling their books. And you're absolutely right. It's kind of, it just raises the bar. But that isn't just for the big 5 publishers anymore. That's for anyone who's published a book. And you're right, you know, you can be standing there, and if you know that they've written this book and they're talking about part of that journey, or even just one of the chapters out of their book, it hooks you in so much more. And then obviously, if you get the chance to go and meet that person and get the book signed, and it's just a whole amazing opportunity and feeling from both, you know, the reader and the author.
Yeah. And as you know, I've done the compilation books where I've shared women in business stories, and I'm just about to work on another one. But I've never written my own book. And it's there, it's in my head, and it is coming out, Shelley, and I've got some accountability coming on here. So what about, I mean, obviously not everybody gets signed by a publisher. So what are the alternatives into publishing your book?
So I started by self-publishing all those years ago. So that book I was talking about earlier, my first non-fiction, I self-published. And at that time, back in 2014, I didn't really think about submitting it to a publisher. Actually, it was just, oh, I can do this myself. How exciting. I'm just going to go and find out how that works. And I've always been a bit of a curious person. So it was like, oh, right, okay, what challenge can I set myself now? I'll work it out. I obviously outsource. I'm not a graphic designer, so I don't know how to put a book cover together, so I outsource that. I am definitely not a professional editor and proofreader, so I certainly found somebody who could help me put it into logical language. And I did actually have somebody help me just with the formatting, because again, I'm not technical. So even though you're doing it yourself, there's a little bit of a team going on, which is quite nice. And then once you've got everything together, it's just a process of uploading it to a platform like Amazon or Ingram Spark, which are the self-publishing platforms. And just setting, you have to do a little bit of background. So you have to know what categories you're going to put yourself in. You have to know what you're going to price the book at. And there's a few little bits and pieces, but it is so easy to work your way through it and get it up and out into the world. And I think I self-published 9 books before I got signed by my publisher. But yeah, I mean, I'd go back to self-publishing as well. I just think you've got total control when you're doing it yourself.
And I have read that some fairly famous authors whose books have been turned into films couldn't get a publishing contract and self-published in the early days. Yeah. So, great things can happen from self-publishing, can't it?
Huge, yeah, absolutely. And I know that there's a lot of like the big stream authors now, they start calling themselves hybrid authors, which means that they have got a contract, but they're also putting stuff out themselves, either in their own name or a pseudonym or whatever. But yeah, it's just such an easy thing to do for yourself, that you've got to be professional always. You are the brand and the business. So if you're putting out a non-fiction business book, you have to go through the right things. You can't just whack out a Word document, for example. There's a bit more to it than that. But yeah, it's an easy process.
Yeah. And you now mentor writers. I mean, I've been on one of your mentoring programs, so I know how good it is. But you actually mentor, group mentoring and individual, I assume.
Yes.
Take people through those stages so that they've actually got some accountability. They know they're going in the right direction. How far do you take that? Do you take that as far as publication, or do you leave them to their own devices for publication?
It's really the way I work. So, self-doubt is a massive thing, isn't it? So I know when I was starting my business doing the mentoring, I remember saying, who do you want to work with me? And a lot of people going, you've published 19 books. I think that's a bit of oh, right, okay. But for me, it was like, well, I can't do the editing. I can't do the graphic design. I can't do the publishing. And that kind of sat in my head for a long time. But then I started to talk to people. I started to work with people who were like, no, that's way off in the future. What I need now is a bum kick. I need you to tell me every month that I've got to write 2 chapters, or I've got to research this, or I've got to rock up and do this part of the work and the outlining. And that was when it kind of clicked into place to me that my niche is getting people going. Yeah. So I will take them as far as they need me to. If they want me to be with them through the publishing process, then that's 100% possible. But I would outsource those people that can help them with the bits that I can't do.
And I think that everyone should play to their strengths. I've always said, and there are certain people that can do things far better than me. I don't do accounts. I have an accountant.
Exactly.
You outsource what you can't do, and you get the experts in to do it. Yeah. So there might be people listening here. So no, I want to go for the publishing contract. I want to get, I want to write to publishers. There's a certain pitch you have to put to publishers, isn't there? You have to pitch it in a certain way. Yeah. Did you get picked up by a publisher, or did you present to them?
So I was picked up. So there's a couple of ways it can happen. You can submit. A lot of the larger publishing houses, they won't accept unsolicited manuscripts, which means you need to get an agent first. Now, it can take you as long to get an agent as it can to get a publisher. So it could be that you're sitting on a manuscript and it's 5 years before it sees the light of day. And that's just the nature of it. Finding an agent can take a year. Then the agent's got to place you with a publisher, which can take a year or 2 years. Then it's 2 years to actually publish the book itself. So it can be a lengthy process, which I think is what the appeal is with self-publishing. Some of the smaller presses and the medium-sized press houses, they will take you on. Again, it's all a submission process. So it's kind of like putting together a pack, if you like. You'd have a cover letter. You'd probably have the first 3 chapters, and you'd need a hook. You'd need them. If you imagine a publisher's got a stack of 50 manuscripts on their desk, what makes you stand out? Why are they going to publish your book? So yeah, it's a grueling process, I think, but it's absolutely worth it, definitely.
And then there are those hybrid publishers that have popped up now that have set up publishing companies and just basically take people through the publishing process, don't they? Yeah. I think some of them you have to be a little bit wary of, because I personally don't think it should cost you £15,000 to publish a book.
they just shouldn't. So yeah, signing up for some of these companies where, yes, we do everything for you and this is the price tag. I mean, it's very rare you're going to make your money back anyway, because that's just the nature of it. But you can, you know, you can maybe recoup your costs and maybe a small profit margin, but not if you have got one book and it's cost you 15 grand. Outsourcing a book, you know, yes, you've got your publisher, your proofreader, your editor, so maybe that's £600-700. A graphic designer, again, £400-500-600. You know, there are smaller amounts that you can get it to and still be able to make a little bit of money as well. But yeah, the hybrids, I think I always say, just be very wary. A lot of them can prey on the fact that you get to say I'm an author, but they might say we can do all your marketing. That's not necessarily the case, because even the big 5 publishers now, your HarperCollins and things like that, they expect it's worth just double checking, fine print, all the usual things with hybrids.
Yeah, and you know, I've heard a few nightmare tales with a couple of hybrids. Fortunately, ones that I don't know that well. That, you know, they've signed these contracts, they've paid over these large sums of money, promised all this marketing, and they don't even own the books, and they get sort of 70p per copy, you know, and it takes a long time to make your money back. When I self-published the I Am a Woman Who books, I actually got them printed myself. I didn't even go down the Amazon route. And I just got them printed at a local printer and covered my costs, because I saw them as a business card. They were just and I gift them as well as selling them, but I gift some when people join my programs. It's nice to be able to give them, you know, a book or something like that. So I had a purpose for them, and I had an audience for them, and I think that's key, isn't it?
Oh, massive. Yeah, absolutely. And you're totally right. I know I one of my clients that I work with, she had a non-fiction book, and she was like, I wanted to start taking it out, but obviously, like yourself, she'd published, she'd done the printer, which is a brilliant way of doing it, especially if you can work with an independent, because obviously it's a win-win for both of you. But she was like, you know, these are quite hefty books. And I was like, well, why don't you take the first 2 chapters out and make a little slimline business card, if you like. So she had the same book cover on. It was very glossy, but it's like a little dip your toe into my book. So of course, the first 2 chapters, you're hooked, aren't you? You're like, well, I need the rest now, so I'm going to go out and buy that. So yeah, there's so much you can do to promote yourself and sort of boost the sales as well.
I think the thing that shocked me about when you write your book and you put it out there was you obviously, I register mine to say that they're registered, because I think you have to register them.
The British Library,
the British Library, and then you get all these requests through the post to send copies to all the libraries all over the country, and it's really bizarre, because I do see my books popping up in libraries, and people say, I read this, it was in my local library, and it really was. And I was getting quite annoyed at one point. I think I had 10 letters come in, all asking for 2 copies, please. And you have to send them off. But, you know, then you're thinking, well, you're reaching an audience that perhaps wouldn't be able to afford to buy, and may still get the benefit from the book. And you never know, they might go into a shop and buy another one, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. They get to know you then. It is an amazing feeling. I remember being tagged in on or sent a picture by a reader over in Australia, where she'd seen one of my non-fiction books on the top shelf of her library, and she followed me on Facebook, and it was like, for me, it was like, oh my God, I've made it to Australia. This is just amazing. It was just wonderful.
It's quite strange, quite bizarre. So let's just run through some of the benefits of publishing your book. So we've talked about marketing and credibility. What other benefits might there be?
I think so. If you think about, especially if it's a business book, I mean, obviously the benefits of writing werewolf books are mostly, you know, for yourself, self-satisfaction and being able to entertain and inspire and tell a story. But if it's a business book, then the benefits are just raising that profile. And I know you're massive on visibility. That's probably the biggest benefit, is that whole standing in front of a crowd, being able to say that you're an author. People knowing you without knowing you, if that makes sense. The amount of networks I go to, oh my goodness, you're Shelley Wilson. Oh, I got your book. And that is it's just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. But you can help so many people as well. You know, your clients, you know, what do they need help with? You can reach more people. You can make money. Yes, you can. You can get speaking engagements. I'm sure that you will look at anyone who wants to speak for Woman Who, you'll look at them, you'll vet them, you'll make sure they sort of match your criteria. But if they've got a book, do you automatically go, oh, hang on a minute, that's a bit like an extra a sort of bar. So everyone else is thinking that. People are looking for speakers, for workshop hosts, for collaborators, and having that book in your arsenal is just a massive tick in the box. And I think, yeah, that's a really strong benefit for your business and for you as well.
And we are running out of time, but there is one thing I just want you to share with the audience before I ask you to share your top tip and piece of advice. Now, I've heard from a lot of people, and I do it myself. If I want to write something or create content, I'm much better when I go to somewhere different, you know, out of my office, out on holiday, somewhere where I've cleared all my headspace and I've not got the distractions. Tell the audience where you go and what you do to create.
That's a fabulous idea, and you know it's coming, don't you? I jump in Snoopy, I jump in my camper van, I grab my laptop, and I will head off all over the place. So yeah, if I can go by water, even better. But I've written books in Edinburgh, in Whitby, in Cornwall, in Somerset, and yeah, I think getting out of the house and just that change of environment and filling your creative well makes a massive difference when you're trying to do anything like this.
Yeah, I wanted to share. So Snoopy the camper van has become synonymous with your creativity. As soon as you go off, and I see on the social channels you're off on one of your events. I think there's another book coming.
Yeah.
And sadly, we have run out of time. You shared some really, really interesting thoughts for our listeners. But I always ask my guests to leave us with a top tip or piece of advice. So what would yours be?
I think what I'd say is, if you've got that question in your head, how do I start? Grab yourself a massive piece of paper, coloured pens, post-it notes and mind map your idea. Just brainstorm absolutely anything and everything you can about your book idea, and then get in touch and I'll help you do the rest.
And on that note, we're going to put all your contact details in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can do. We'll put your website in there, your LinkedIn profile, and we'll try and link one of your books through Amazon as well. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Shelley Wilson, international best-selling author and writer mentor.
Thanks, Sandra.